Today I'm going to show you what's inside of the Kia Sorento and how it works. Now, while other reviews are going to rave about the fancy touchscreen and the amount of cargo room that you get in this thing, we're going to be taking a look under the hood and underneath the Sorento to see just what makes this thing run. And taking a look under the engine bay, we've got a 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine situated transversely for front wheel drive, and that's mated to an 8-speed dual clutch automatic transmission. Now there is a 1.6 turbo, a hybrid, as well as a 2.5 naturally aspirated engine available, but this 2.5 turbo is the one that you want to get if you want sporty performance from your sport utility vehicle. Now, taking a look at some of the components over here, we do have the air intake, which is going to draw fresh air into this air filter, and that's going to bring air down straight to the turbocharger, which is going to pressurize that air. That pressurized air is going to then be sent through this charge pipe down to the front of the vehicle, where we have an air intercooler. And from the front of the vehicle, you can see the left half of the radiator is basically the air intercooler, while the right half over there is the actual radiator. Now, after cooling down, that pressurized air is going to come up through this tube here, sent to the drive-by-wire throttle body, and then into the air intake plenum before going into the engine to get burned. Next up, we take a look at the fuel system. Now, interestingly, Hyundai's gone away from just having direct injection to having a dual injection port and direct injection system. So you basically have the benefits of both and won't have carbon buildup issues. Basically, low pressure fuel is going to come to this fuel rail over here, which powers these 4 injectors for your port injection. Teeing off of that, we've got this tube which leads to the direct injection gasoline pump, which is going to pump it up to a really high pressure, and then it's going to send it off through this tube, which goes down underneath the intake plenum to another set of 4 direct injectors to power the direct injection system. Now, with direct injection, you can better control the combustion, whereas with port injection, you don't have issues with carbon buildup. Now, changing spark plugs, and this is going to be very straightforward. Like any other 4-cylinder engine, you've got the 4 inline coils here, which you can remove to get to the spark plugs. Now, once all the air from inside of the engine gets burnt, it's going to be sent out to the exhaust, which is going to go straight to this turbocharger manifold assembly over here. That's basically going to use the flow of the exhaust in order to compress the air that's coming in on the intake side. The exhaust is then going to flow down to the catalytic converter, which is this thing over here, and then out to the bottom to the flex pipe. And as you can imagine, things are going to get pretty hot by having this turbocharger in here. That's why they have all these heat shields to protect this plastic wiring loom and this plastic valve cover from getting burned. Now, accessing the oil dipstick is pretty straightforward. At least they still give you one, and of course you're definitely going to need that because this is a Hyundai and they tend to always run low on oil. This does take 0W 30 weight oil with the oil cap right here. Now, this powertrain is fairly new. It's been out for about 3 years now, but it's already got its fair share of issues in a typical Hyundai and Kia fashion. And the main issue is with having a short piston skirt because they wanted it to be more efficient, but that causes excessive piston slap and then it tends to burn oil. And of course, with all dual clutch automatics, they're very jerky, and they blamed it on the oil pump. Changing the air filter on this is super easy. You just lift up this latch here, put these 2 tabs down, and then you can pull out the air filter. One hand and no tools. Now, the valve cover is made of a cheap looking plastic, and that sits on top of this aluminum head. Now, underneath this timing cover, we do have dual variable valve timing, one on the intake side and back here on the exhaust side, and they're electronically controlled as opposed to an oil control valve. Now, back in the day, we used to say that timing chains were better than belts because you don't have to replace them over the life of the vehicle, but with the amount of failures we're seeing with timing chains skipping teeth, stretching, snapping, and the timing chain cover leaking oil, I think the timing belts are actually a lot better, and they should probably make a comeback, even though you have to replace them every so often. Now, in front of the chain cover is the drive belts. This here, you could see the drive belt that goes to the alternator. That there is the tensioner. You just have to rotate it clockwise, and you should be able to get this belt off. Now, the alternator is situated at the top with the AC compressor way below it. Changing an alternator on these isn't too difficult. There's 1 bolt down from below and 1 bolt from above, and it should come up through the top, and it should have enough clearance to come up through the top. At least you don't have to remove the radiator for that. I say Kia needs to do a better job when they're assembling these. I can see there's already fins that are bent, and this car hasn't even reached its first oil change yet. Now, just like most front-wheel drive vehicles, there's 3 engine mounts. There's one here on the passenger side, then there's one over here on the driver's side, which is underneath the battery, a little difficult to see, and then the one at the back underneath, which is a torque mount. Now, taking a look at the cooling system, it is somewhat conventional. Unlike a hybrid car or another turbocharged car that will have 2 systems, this one has a single one with the pressure cap located over here on the cooling tank as opposed to being on the radiator. There's a small little breather tube that goes to the radiator, but this main hose actually goes down to the water pump area at the back. Now, that pulley down the center there is the water pump. It's pretty easy to replace them down below. It has its own dedicated belt that goes to the crankshaft, and it's a stretch type belt. There's no tensioner on it. Now, at the front here, we do have one giant radiator fan, and as I mentioned before, the radiator basically takes up 2/3 while the air intercooler takes up the other third of the frontal space. It Interesting to note that the radiator support is all made of an injection plastic through the front, so if you have a small impact at the front here, this is actually going to crack rather than bend and reflex. Unfortunately, in order to change the radiator, you got to disassemble the bumper and the front end, and of course because you got radar sensors up there, you're going to have to recalibrate all that. So sometimes you guys think that all this plastic structural stuff is them cheaping out, but yeah, while it is cheaper, it's also there because it's softer for a pedestrian to hit plastic than to hit metal in a pedestrian collision. Now from the radiator, we do have the lower and upper radiator hoses, and interestingly they both go to this entire thermal management unit, or ITM. Now this unit is made of plastic, which I don't like for any cooling component because after a bunch of heat cycling they tend to crack and leak. Now the intelligent thermal unit is responsible for the coolant flow through the engine and to the radiator. So for example, on a cold morning like right now, if you want to warm up, well, it's going to close off the radiator and allow the engine and of course the heater core so you can warm up inside of the cabin, and once those are warmed up, then it will open this back up. Basically, instead of using a mechanical thermostat, it's giving that responsibility to the computer to control it more intelligently. The unfortunate downside though is that you will need Kia's diagnostic system in order to do a very simple thing like a coolant bleed, because it's got valves in there that need to be opened and closed to get all the air out of the system if you do some work. Now, as with any turbocharged engine, you're going to have extra hoses and wires going around because that's just the complexity of a turbocharger. You will have to supply it with extra oil and coolant to cool it down. By the way, you've also got the positive crankcase ventilation system built into the valve cover over here. This here would be your diaphragm as your oil separator. And then we've got this hose over here, which is going to take that oily air and dump it straight into your turbocharger so it gets all gummed up with carbon. Further taking a look around here, we do have the fuse box, which is pretty easy to access. Of course, the battery and the engine computer. Taking a look at the braking system on the Kia Sorento, you'll see that it's still using a vacuum booster, still kind of old school. A lot of vehicles now are moving towards electronic brake booster. Even more so, this is a turbocharged engine, but it doesn't use a mechanically powered vacuum pump. Instead, if you follow that line, it comes to this electronically controlled vacuum pump at the front here. Of course, you got your standard ABS motor located underneath the firewall here, which is going to control all your autonomous braking features, traction control, and anti-lock brake. Now, next up, you come to the transmission, which is a bit of a sore spot. It's an 8-speed dual clutch transmission, which hasn't had the best of reviews in terms of driving dynamics and also reliability. Right now at the front here, we do have the transmission computer, which is kind of close to the front of the vehicle in case you get into a big accident. Now behind that, we do have the transmission pan, which is actually sitting upright as opposed to underneath the vehicle, and inside of there is where the valve body is located. Now at the top here, we've got the transmission vent, and this here is the transmission fill hole. Now in order to check the transmission fluid, Kia wants you to remove this bolt and shove a suitable object in there and measure how many centimeters is in there, as opposed to actually supplying a real dipstick, which they could have done. Now off to the left here, this giant thing is an accumulator, which is going to accumulate pressure for your next shift, and then further below that, which you can see, there is a transmission cooler. Now like all new cars, the headlights are a full LED now, so you'd expect them to be non-replaceable, but there's a cap on there that says use only a standard bulb. But when you look inside of the cap, there's nothing to be replaced. There's no bulb that's removable. It's all one piece. Taking a look underneath the Sorento, you can see that it's pretty much all covered up at the front here with this plastic shield. However, halfway to the back there, it's all opened out. At least the important parts are all covered up. Now, looking under the engine of the Kia Sorento, you'll see we have a stamped steel oil pan, which actually looks pretty huge. It's got a good amount of volume to it. You got the drain plug over there and the filter over here. Now sadly, the filter housing is made of plastic, as well as the housing that it bolts up to the block over here with. Now other manufacturers have tried using plastic here and it never works out because it always cracks and leaks, and then you're going to lose oil pressure and drip oil all over. Now in front of it there is an oil cooler, which is here. Interestingly, this hose here that runs from this cooler all the way over to the transmission cooler here kind of has this swirl S shape. Why couldn't it just have run a direct line over there? I don't know. Now this is a cartridge style oil filter, which is kind of messy because you have to take out the filter. I'd rather a canister style. Now it looks like Hyundai Kia is taking one from the Germans over here by using a level sensor, and that's because their engines used to burn so much oil they'd run them out of oil and then try to claim them under warranty. At least in this case, they can see if the engine's run out of oil and what level it's running at, and then log that data so that it knows when you want to claim warranty if you ran it out of oil or not. And just to the right of that oil filter is the AC compressor. This is probably something you'd access from down below if it needed replacement. Now looking up from underneath here at the passenger side wheel well, you can see the water pump and that really thin belt that comes to the crankshaft over here. That's a stretch belt. You pretty much got to replace the water pump from the bottom of the fender liner here. There's no room to get it from up top. And here's a look at the radiator assembly from underneath. This here is a lower radiator hose which connects over on this side. I don't know why you need two lower radiator hoses and having to join them in between. I feel like that's just another failure point where they could burst. So here's a look at the transmission from underneath. Now this here is the fluid pump, which is the subject of a lot of failures from earlier models of this transmission. Just ahead of that pump, you can see this is the bottom of the transmission pan, which is situated vertically. We do have a drain plug over here, but we've also got another drain plug for the transmission back here. And just above this pump here, you can see that rib thing is actually the transmission cooler, and it's got its lines that go out to the radiator. Now attached to the transmission and subframe is this torque mount, which prevents the assembly from rocking back and forth under hard acceleration. So one thing I forgot to mention is the starter motor. It is buried in between the engine and the transmission, connected to the transmission side underneath these charge pipe hoses. Because this engine does have start stop, it's going to take its toll on that starter, so you will end up having to replace it. Now once that 8-speed transmission is done shifting its gears, it's first going to send its power to the front wheels through these axles over here, but attached to that is also this transfer case, which is going to send power to the rear wheels. Now of course this has its own gear fluid. We've got a fill port up here and a drain port over there, so it's pretty easy to change it out. Now from back underneath here, you can see just how the transfer case attaches to the transmission over here and goes to the drive shaft, which goes to the back. In the back here, we've also got a clear view of the power steering rack. This looks like it's a column mounted EPS where the motor is up on the steering shaft inside the vehicle, and this is just a simple rack and pinion that's mounted to the subframe over here and over here. Now from underneath here, you can see the back of that catalytic converter that came off the turbocharger. It's going to go over to this flex pipe. Now I'm not a fan of flex pipes because over a while they do tend to leak. Those jointed connections are a lot better. The exhaust is kind of mounted a little loose in there, don't you think? Now that exhaust is then going to travel through this little resonator over here and then out to the rear muffler at the back. I feel like these welds are probably going to be the main failure point in about 5 years when this thing starts to rust away. Now the underneath middle side of this vehicle is basically a giant cavity. Like besides the drive shaft and maybe the exhaust, I feel like they could have given us some more interior room. There's a lot of wasted space underneath here. I mean, you could use it as undercar storage if you have to take things across the border or something. Or if you got an extra gift for your wife at the mall and you don't want her to see it. Taking a look at the Sorento suspension setup, they do use a stamped steel subframe, which is nice because it also extends all the way to the front and then across the front of the vehicle. A lot of cheaper Hyundais actually stop the subframe right here and then just use plastic to reinforce the front. Now underneath here we do have a stamped steel control arm with a bolted on style ball joint. Now they are using a pinch bolt into the knuckle, which is good because if you use a castle nut, you'd probably have to take the axle off in order to change a ball joint. So in this case, you could just pop it down and change it out. Now because the steering knuckles are made of aluminum, they are using bolted on bearings, but they are using these Torx fasteners to hold them on. But at least you don't need to take it to a press to change bearings. So here we are underneath the back of the Sorento, and if you'll notice behind the rear bumper here, you'll see that this rebar is all made of plastic now. There's no more metal. That means if you got any minor little collision, this rebar is just going to crack. It's not really going to flex as much as metal would. Welcome to the world of plastic. Now the exhaust continues down at the back here with this rear muffler in the middle, and then it comes out to the back here. We've got a muffler only on the right side, and its exhaust tip is hidden pointed downward. However, over here on the driver's side, there's just a completely empty cavity. Usually you'd put like the evap canister or something here, but at least they chose to cover it up so you can hide your gifts or candy or whatever else you wanted here. Now at the back here, the drive shaft is going to meet the rear differential, and this is where most of the action happens because you've got your actuator over here, which is going to transfer that torque from the front wheels over to the rear wheels. Now this differential has a fill port up here and a drain plug down at the bottom here because you will have to change its fluid periodically. Now that torque is then going to be split through this open differential out to these tiny little axles, which is almost as big as my finger. Yeah, I think it's awesome that they're still providing a spare tire with these vehicles. A lot of other vehicles will just sell you a roadside assistance plan, which is not really as effective because you'd still have to tow the car away even if you've got someone to change the wheel for you. I just wish they put them inside the vehicle so they don't get as rusty as salt kicks up in here and kind of corrodes it away. Now taking a look at the rear suspension setup on the Sorento, you'll see that we are using a stamped steel subframe, which is okay. This is a children's vehicle. We also have a multi-link suspension setup, which is great for handling, especially especially when you want to make it around that kiss and ride and you're dropping them off at school. We do have steel control arms, so you'll see there's one at the front here which is steel. The one at the bottom here actually supports the spring as well as the shock absorber at the back here, and the sway bar link over here which goes to the sway bar, which in turn is mounted to that subframe. Now this member also controls the camber, so if you're going to be lowering this vehicle and slamming it out, this is the bolt that you'd have to adjust. So if you follow this little axle, you'll see that it goes into this aluminum knuckle over here. There's 4 bolts that hold the hub bearing on, which means that you don't need a press to change this one out either. There's not much to say about the gas tank. It is made of plastic. There's no guards or anything to protect it from speed bumps if you're going over too fast. It is held in by a steel strap here, which is probably going to rust away after a little while. Well, if you didn't get the fancy model with the sensor where you wave your feet to open the tailgate, at least you got this dead end connector here where you could probably add one in at some point. And now we're going to have a listen to the exhaust. So instead of using fancy lug nuts with covers on them, they're just putting a piece of plastic in front of it and giving you this tool because it's a lot cheaper and supposedly looks a lot nicer. Taking a look inside of the rear wheel well here, you can see this long shock absorber which is going to run down to the stamp seal control arm at the back here. So here's a better view of the multi-link setup. We've got 4 links: the upper control arm, the bed pan at the back here with a spring, we've got the lateral link at the front here, and then the control blade or trailing arm at the front here. Now these are all made of steel, which is cost effective. What is this? Well, at least it's good to see that the knuckle itself is made of aluminum to save weight from the unsprung mass. It's good to see the cables are also tied down. There are some manufacturers that skimp on that and then it ends up grazing the wheel. And brake hose is kind of just dangling there. Poking around here, you can see that front lateral link is going to control the toe when you move that camber bolt. The trailing arm here is going to control the lateral motion back and forth. And then of course this link here is going to control the spring. The upper control arm is this U-shaped arm here that bolts up to the subframe. Good luck in trying to get that bolt and nut out if you're trying to replace one of these. Overall, it's a very standard compact design that you'll find in more CUVs and SUVs, but you won't find this in something like a minivan, which needs a more flatter floor. Now looking at the rear brakes, you'll see we've got a single solid disc with a single piston floating caliper. We do have an electronic parking brake, which means that you will either have to hack this or get Kia's diagnostic tool in order to retract this when doing a simple brake job. I like that they made the filler pipe out of metal and they kind of protected it with the shield here. Some other manufacturers would make it completely out of rubber and run it right in front of the wheel where some debris could kick up and cut it loose. Taking a look at the Sorento's front suspension, you can see we've got a McPherson strut front suspension with a very long and slender stabilizer link that bolts up to the sway bar down at the front here. This is a very typical style suspension where it's very simple, easy to work on for longevity, but it's not going to give you the best of handling. But who needs that on a mall crawler anyways? You probably want to step up to the Genesis version with the double wishbone suspension if you need that kind of capability. This one's interesting. It's got this little weight here for vibration dampening. Now a lot of parts are stamped Hyundai and Kia on these vehicles. I'm just wondering what the Genesis parts are stamped. Now looking at the bottom, you've got that aluminum steering knuckle and your steel inner and outer tire rods. It's interesting they're using a cotter pin through here, but they don't have a castle nut to kind of prevent the rotation. Looking at the back here, you can see that nice thick sway bar, which is going to mount up to the bushing here on the subframe. Now replacing a control arm is not too difficult. So one of these, you've got one bolt here for the ride bushing, and then for the handling bushing at the front here, you've got these 2 bolts over here which bolt to the subframe. Pretty easy to get to. And here's a look at that ball joint from this side with the pinch bolt. You can see that it does get pretty close to the dust shield, and this dust shield seems like it's almost touching the rotor. Front brakes of the Sorento are very standard single piston floating caliper design with a ventilated disc rotor. I kind of wish as these SUVs and CUVs start getting heavier and heavier that they would use a dual piston caliper setup at the front here. Now the brake hose is tied down nice, and now we'll have a listen to the engine. You see, unlike the Chevy Blazer or the Ford Escape that I reviewed, they actually put closeout panels on the fenders. It makes it look nice and neat, and it doesn't give you that sharp edge when you have to work over here. I like that. So overall, I think that the Kia Sorento is a pretty good contender for its class. The build quality is pretty much average with any other CUV out there. It's pretty much a sea of plastic materials, wires and hoses, and of course that unreliable turbocharger under the hood. Of course, a naturally aspirated or hybrid powertrain would be a little bit more reliable. I just wish that Hyundai and Kia would pay attention to the reliability of the big things that matter, such as their engines. This being the Theta 3, it sits in the shadow of the Theta 2 engines, which had that massive recall for failure failing so often. And then of course they got the dual clutch transmission, which I don't think is really the right transmission choice for this vehicle. And from what I'm hearing, this powertrain is not being the most reliable, having only been 3 years on the market. At least if they could stop focusing on giving people what they want at a very low price point while still making sacrifices under the hood so that they can meet safety regulations, emissions, and efficiency, then they could build a proper reputation for reliability and have a good automobile. And that's my take on the Kia Sorento SUV. Now I look forward to seeing these nicely styled SUVs in my mall parking lot when I go to do my groceries, as they sure are going to sell a lot of these by tricking them into having a long warranty. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one. Yeah, I'm not getting that back. It fell down to the bottom.